Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I think it's important that we meet together. We have different backgrounds, we come from all over the world, and cybersecurity is a challenging and complex issue. So I think it's very important that we organize this kind of conferences. So let's go to the subject of my talk. As Lata just explained, I'll be focusing on what I called economic dimensions of national cybersecurity strategies in the Asia-Pacific region. Just to make it short, why I'm very much interested on this subject, it's because actually I'm wearing two hats. That is, on the one hand, I'm involved in the digital business community. I work with startups, I work with digital companies, I work with cybersecurity companies, and on the other hand, I'm doing a scholar work, an academic work, mostly working on policies. So my subject is really a mix of those intertwined interests, and I want to show you that it is really deeply intertwined. That my take on it is that currently cyber security policy making has evolved and is almost systematically integrating economic dimensions. And those economic dimensions really stand at what I call the nexus of national security, innovation capability, and commercial interests. And just to get you hooked in the subject, I'm going to share with you two news. So it's not today's news, but last week's news. So it's still, let's say, fresh news. The one news has to do with France. There are currently a harsh debate in France regarding the topic of building a sovereign operating system. And so our deputies have submitted this project to the National Assembly, and it has been voted. But our French tech engineers and cybersecurity techies are very critical about this project. So this one news has to do with an economic dimension, that is indigenous cybersecurity technology and capability. The second news, we're going to switch to another continent, to South Korea. So my colleague here certainly is aware of that. So last week, South Korean government has specified the target countries for domestically made cybersecurity technology exports. That is another economic dimension, that is domestically made cybersecurity technology export programs. So what is my point? My point here is that we're talking about security, cybersecurity as an objective, right? That is securing cyberspace. Mitigating cyber insecurity. My point here is that cybersecurity is also a business. Cybersecurity is also a market. And cybersecurity is becoming an industry. So I really wanted to highlight this point today with you. Don't worry, I keep it short. Don't worry, Lata. So I just wanted to focus on 3 points, that is, especially regarding the Asia-Pacific region. So one point is that its economic dimension of national cybersecurity policies is really a growing visible component of several national cyber strategies in the region. So some Asian countries really integrate those economic dimensions into their strategy for cyberspace, and it can be an industrial policy, it can be an ambition, it can be I mean, there are many reasons for these countries to do that. I'm going to single out 4 countries just to illustrate the different ways economic dimensions can be integrated into national cybersecurity strategies. Please allow me to start with India. So, India, to me, economic dimensions in India's national cybersecurity strategy is very pragmatic, and it is consistently encompassing the protection of economic interests. So India's strategy is aiming rather at spurring knock-on technological effects and providing opportunities for innovation by the domestic industry. So that's one example. Then we have China, for example. China has been consistently focusing on the promotion and development of the domestic information security industry, coupled with an ever-expanding discourse on indigenous innovation and more stringent government procurement laws. Then we have a third example, Japan. As you know, and we talked about this this morning, Japan has revamped its national cybersecurity strategy in 2013, and in September 2015, the final draft. And it's very interesting that because in this new strategy, Japan is clearly highlighting the economic dimensions of cybersecurity, and the role of the Internet of Things industry and the cybersecurity industry is quite clear, as they are considered both as economic growth engines. And then, please allow me to go back to South Korea. South Korea has set strong ambitions, not only the development of domestic information security industry, but also regarding the export, as I just said before, of domestically developed cybersecurity products and services. And to me, South Korea has a very business-oriented view of cybersecurity as an economic driver, both at home and abroad. So these are only a few examples to show you that more and more Asian countries, that it's also happening all over the world, are integrating those economic dimensions into their national cybersecurity policies. Those economic dimensions are very often linked to a quest for indigenous cybersecurity capability and technology. So, and as far as the Asia-Pacific region is concerned, I would go as far as to say that it's a distinctive feature shared by several countries in the region, and I would call that a quest for indigenization. So this quest for domestic innovation cybersecurity technology has to be assessed within a broader spectrum of the general development of ICT and the promotion and development of indigenous technology in the overall field of ICT. And the ultimate goal would be to get freed from an increased dependency on foreign IT technologies. And it has to be assessed within the context of the predominance of foreign and especially US cybersecurity technology. And of course, we can wonder about the Snowden impact, about this promotion of and this drive for indigenous cyber security technology and capability. So what is the general idea behind that? It's very simple. It would be that compared to foreign imports and beyond the question of paying costly ICT license fees, indigenous products would be safer, or at least more controllable in terms of security. But from a wider point of view, we have to consider that the inevitable corollaries of the institutionalization of domestically made technology preference is potential market access restriction for foreign vendors. And we have to consider that national cybersecurity policies may have an impact on the global cyber supply chain, and this cannot be entirely decorrelated from international trade considerations. So now we move to the third point of this very short presentation of my paper, is that we have to keep in mind that most IT products are composite, globally sourced, and part of a global cyber supply chain. So we really have to keep in mind the international dimension of cybersecurity from a global trade and cyber supply chain perspectives. And what I've noticed here is that cybersecurity issues are now clearly taken into account in trade and investment liberalization negotiations, particularly within the global trend of bilateral and regional free trade agreements, and especially with regards to cross-border data flows, data localization, e-commerce. And for countries who are part of these efforts, there is really a stringent necessity to address how these trade and investment agreements may affect their own set of national cybersecurity policies. And I switched to a very specific example relating to what's happening in the Asia-Pacific region. Is the current negotiation of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as you all know. And it's interesting to see that among the 30 chapters of this very, very long document, there are 3 chapters which entail cybersecurity dimensions. Chapter 13 on telecommunications, chapter 14 on electronic commerce, and chapter 18 on intellectual property. And so we won't go, don't worry, I won't be getting into the details of the TPP because it's 2,000 pages, so we don't need that, but just to highlight this point. And I think it's interesting to see how it has been integrated into free trade agreements. And then regarding international trade, we have, of course, the WTO, what's happening at the WTO. And we have, for example, a highly controversial provision that is the Article 21 on security exception of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. And so you know that WTO may not be the right venue for everything that has to do with cyber espionage, but it's still relevant for everything that has to do with government procurement, regulation, market access for foreign vendors, etc. Then I switched to a third agreement that is also interesting, that is the Wassenaar Agreement. And the Wassenaar Arrangement, sorry, it's not an agreement, it's an arrangement. So the Wassenaar Arrangement has an export control regime on conventional arms and dual-use goods and technologies, which is, as you all know, a voluntary and multilateral arrangement built on consensus-based decision-making. And just because we are talking about the APAC region, today Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand are the only APAC participating states in the Wassenaar Arrangement. And you all know that in December 2013, there has been a new dedicated cyber amendment, and it has been stated in the form of additional items to the Wassenaar Arrangement's control lists. And so now intrusion malwares, intrusion exploits, and IP surveillance items shall be subject to export control. I want to remember that this Wassenaar Arrangement does not entail enforcement provisions because it is based on voluntary compliance. However, if it is effectively enforced, this cyber amendment shall have an impact on how businesses are able to legitimately share cybersecurity information and technology across borders. And for participating states in this arrangement, and when complying with the provision, there is a need to balance their cybersecurity export ambitions with their formal commitments to the Wassenaar Arrangement. Whereas for third-party states which are not participating in this arrangement, there is an incentive for indigenous cybersecurity capability and technology, and then self-reliance. So you see how we made the hoop talking about this subject of economic dimensions in national cybersecurity strategies. So just a few words for a conclusion. So the Asia-Pacific region is no exception to this growing global trend. And to me, it really stands, as I said in introduction, at the nexus of national security considerations, innovation, capability, ambitions, and commercial interests, drive. And it's still challenging because our national economies are not decorrelated from the global economy, which means that national cybersecurity industries are equally not disassociated from the global cyber supply chain. So I think that cybersecurity is obviously subject to trade-offs between national security imperatives and international trade requirements. And yeah, I'll finish with a Microsoft quote, because this is my business hat talking. Sorry for that. The Microsoft Corporation wrote a white paper entitled Cyber Supply Chain Risk Management Toward a Global Vision of Transparency and Trust. And they end up with a very, very simple question. And I wanted to end up with this very, very simple question. How do countries protect national security interests without inappropriately undermining the value produced by a global supply chain? Thank you for listening.